everyone. Warm welcome to you. This is 2023 Verdict live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloe in Abuja. It's quite surreal, isn't it? And unbelievable that the elections are just 5 days away. Wow. From counting months to weeks and now less than 1 week. In fact, 5 days, and you will be voting a new president, a new round of legislators into the Nigerian National Assembly. What a moment to be alive in our nation's history. That election has generated controversies, and incidents, events of the past days are shaping the issues that will determine how Nigerians will vote on Saturday. A prevailing issue is that of the Naira note swap, and the position or directive of President Buhari. 10 states have now asked the Supreme Court to set aside the president's pronouncement banning old 500 and 1,000 Naira notes. The governors on Friday, by their counsel, Mr. Uwonikoko SAN, won the apex court to declare the president's directive in his Thursday broadcast to the nation as unconstitutional. The plaintiffs in the suit are the attorney generals of Kaduna, Kogi, Zamfara, Ondo, Ekiti, Katsina, Ogun, Cross River, Sokoto, and Lagos State, while the defendants are the attorney generals of the Federation, as well as the attorney general of Bayelsa and Edo State. The plaintiffs, in 12 grounds of application, argue that Buhari's directive extending the validity of old 200 Naira notes for 60 days and his ban on old 500 and 1,000 Naira notes are unconstitutional, overreach, and usurpation of the judicial power of the Supreme Court, being that the case is already before the apex court. Meanwhile, President Buhari has been reacting to the issues raised following that pronouncement. The president has appealed to Nigerians to remain patient with him and his administration as they're making appropriate action or taking appropriate steps to mitigate the hardships occasioned by the controversial Naira swap policy. In a video recording to shore up support for the presidential candidate of the APC, Bola Tinubu, the president thanked Nigerians for electing him to be president for 2 terms and urged them to vote for the APC candidate, describing his desired successor as reliable and sure to build on their achievement. Take a listen to President Buhari.
God has once again brought us to another season of general elections across the country. I am therefore calling on all of you to exercise your franchise in a peaceful atmosphere. I am calling on specifically our traditional rulers, religious leaders, and parents to warn their followers and wards alike to not allow themselves to be used by a few to foment trouble. I want to assure you that the government has taken adequate security measures to allow everyone to come out and cast their votes. I am therefore appealing to everyone to give them the necessary support. I am not a contestant in this election, but my party, the All Progressive Congress, has a candidate in the person of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. As I mentioned before, Tinubu is a true believer in Nigeria, who loves the people and the development of our country. I am calling on all of you to vote Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Meanwhile, that's the President, Muhammadu Buhari, understand that is on an official trip out of the country. Meanwhile, some governors of the APC and the National Working Committee of the APC have held a meeting in Abuja today with the presidential candidate of the party, Bola Tinubu, also in attendance. The attendees at the meeting agreed that the currency redesign is causing tremendous difficulty to Nigerians and have urged the Attorney General of the Federation and the Central Bank Governor to respect the Supreme Court order of interim injunction, which is still subsisting. They also urged President Buhari to intervene in resolving the issues causing great difficulty to Nigerians. The resolution was read by the national chairman of the APC, Senator Abdullahi Adamu. And so we're going into the election of Saturday with some of these controversies on our hands, which Nigerian leaders and people in authority are sharply divided over. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has assured that the February 25th presidential and National Assembly polls will hold nationwide despite the cash crunch and protests in some parts of the country. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, has allayed those fears, saying the commission is working closely with the CBN and security agencies. In view of all of these issues, and we're entering into the week of the election, I'm hoping that we might be able to get some counsel and some perspectives on some of these issues. We are technical in nature, at least for Nigerians to be able to have a sense of direction as we move forward. Let's get some perspectives on this matter. I'm being joined tonight on the program by a chartered accountant, public analyst, and an economic advisor, a former Minister of Education and Solid Minerals, a former Vice President of the World Bank, and a co-founder of the Bring Back Our Girls movement, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sean. How are you doing? Happy New Year.
I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
You look in Nigerian somehow, the sprinkle of the green. I guess you are in the mood for the election, too.
I certainly am in the mood for the elections, and I'm always looking Nigeria.
What a moment to be alive.
I just want Nigeria to be great.
And Nigeria will be great, certainly, yes. I believe so. I know you are a Christian. This is the number 7 election since 1999. What does that tell you?
The end of an era. The end of an era. I mean, I think that people tend to want to dismiss what we're saying in the polity, the level of engagement of the Nigerian citizens in their democracy. We've grown to be a cynical society. So people look at it and say, it will not amount to anything. Well, they're entitled to their perspective. But for someone like me, who's been very, very clear in my mind, based on evidence of what we see of democracies, that you cannot have a democracy, properly so-called, that is based on the hijack of the democratic space by the supply side of democracy, that is the politicians. It is the demand side of democracy that really determines the quality of democracy that any society can have. And we didn't have this level of demand side engagement of our democracy. And today when I see young people and I see women and I see even elders who are so into the 2023 election, I tell you, I derive a lot of joy from it. It makes me glad. It's a level of, it's an index of democratic maturity that we're now understanding the importance of citizens engaging their democratic process. Think of it from the perspective that nobody gains legitimacy to be our leader except we pump them in. So, to the extent that a large catchment of our society, predominantly the middle class of our society, which is loosely defined as anyone with a college degree, a university degree, to the extent that most of them never cared about elections, had no interest. If they got their voter's card, it was not so that they would vote on election day. It was usually so that should the crazy rulers of the country decide that if you don't show your voter's card, you would not be allowed to get on a flight. The middle class love their comfort. So they have that so that they can show it. It's an ID card for something, not for voting. But today, we are hearing a different tone from that class. For the low-income class that always had a fidelity toward elections, there are many more of them that, even though still rationally, rationally engaged in democracy from the perspective of a day. Today is election. Somebody would give me something marginally interesting to add to the little money that I make every day. Even though there's still quite that behavior, but you can see clearly that many more of them are saying things like, I care about my children's future. So the conversation, really has changed on the demand side of our democracy. We've got to look at that and consider it something that is meaningful and profound enough for us to actually celebrate.
Are you one of those who believe that the vote will count this time around, perhaps more than ever in our political history?
I am not just one of those who believe that this would be so, but I am delighted to see that it is the reading of the younger citizens within our electorate, some 40+% of them, that are saying that they believe that that INEC Act amendment that enabled electronic transmission of votes would give them the kind of confidence in the election integrity. And so that if they came out to vote, that if they voted, stayed where they voted, ensured the counting and the uploading of their votes, that they can necessarily believe that election integrity would be the order of the day. And so when people have this optimism about the fairness, that it will be free and that it will be credible, it changes voter behavior, right? So I am very optimistic that the groundswell of confidence that we've made some elections regulatory system progress will actually lead to more people engaging the democratic process.
Do you wish you were on the ballot?
Actually not. The reason that I don't think in those terms of your question is that I am very deliberate in making decisions. I was deliberate in saying that there are things about our democracy that we need to work on, and that I will work on those. So I made a choice already. So there's no way you make a choice.
You wanted to be president at some point.
Yes.
But you changed your mind at some point.
Because of the complete dissonance between my values and the values of those that I was in their political party. And from that experience, wanting to know more about what's wrong with our democracy, what's wrong with the politics of Africa, and spending time in research doing that, and gaining some important understanding that has led to the kinds of things that I am doing, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent, to essentially correct the distortions in democracy. And I am one for the marathon. I believe in the fact that we've got to change the system and the institutions that underpin this craziness of democracy, where in Africa, most of what we have really don't qualify to be called democracies. According to my research, they come on the spectrum of competitive degree of actions in democracy as being monopoly democracies. Mm-hmm. When you have a monopoly democracy, you have to correct the three pillars of democracy: the demand side, the supply side, and the regulatory context. And that's what I am implementing, because elections don't constitute democracy. They are one element of democracy. And we've got to be very structural and systemic in the way that we transform politics, because we now know it. Evidence shows it, that if you don't get good governance, please perish the thought of ever developing. If therefore that is the case, and we have mostly voted for democracy as our system of governance, it means that if democracy is in a state of distortion, we must be very interested in correcting that distortion for the long haul. I don't believe in people whose idea of life is about themselves. No. I mean, come on. What do you want?
Let me, before I take you to a tough that you researched and you are very well known for, which is policy, economic issues, and the kind of money that goes into the pockets of an average person. Let me ask you, if you were to put a finger on what is the major problem of Nigeria's democracy, what would you say it is?
You know, those kinds of questions can be very problematic. The reason is that I wish that there were a single, a silver bullet, what you're looking for is a silver bullet that corrects the problem.
We know we have so many problems, though.
But what
so
my,
it
but
will
what
take
my
us,
research,
it will take all the whole day
yes,
to identify all the problems.
yes,
but it's good to start
it's,
from perhaps the most fundamental problem.
Yes.
Maybe that's the right word to use.
So the most fundamental problem is exactly what I already alluded to, which is that if you looked at the democratic system, it's almost like a triangle. It resembles the triangle that exists in the marketplace of products and services. So in that marketplace triangle, what you have on the left-hand side of that triangle is the consumers. In democracy, they are called the electorate. What you have on the right-hand side would usually be the suppliers of the goods or the service in the marketplace. In the case of a democracy, they are called politicians, the political class. You have the regulator on the apex of the triangle, and they are called regulators. In the case of democracy, there would be things like INEC, there would be things like the Constitution, increasingly the judiciary, which I hope is not planning to subvert the culture of democracy, because this is not how democracy happens in other societies. You don't consistently use the courts to upend the will of the people. We've seen a serial pattern of that going on with our judiciary, and it remains condemnable. However, when you look at the regulatory context, and you look at the demand side, and you look at the supply side, there is a problem on each of those pillars. And that's why Africa's democracy hasn't worked. Post-independence, we have been struggling with democracy.
So if we get leadership right, could it be, if we get leadership right, could it be possible that we can correct the attitude of the governed?
And so we can, but the point that I am making is that you've got to do the three. It's a simultaneous, concurrent set of actions.
It's looking like our INEC is shaping up, our electoral law is shaping up. People are trusting and believe that the process will be right. We're getting somewhere.
Yes.
People are now asking accountability in governance. We're getting somewhere. People are saying don't vote for money, don't vote for ethnic bigotry and religious bigotry on those tripods. We're getting somewhere. The question is, will the system allow the Nigerian people to get to that mode that we think that it's the right place?
So, what you described you can put it in the box of the triangular pillars of democracy, right? Which is the construct that I developed around that research. So, on that demand side, everything you said about people are demanding, people are expecting, people are acting, all of that around the electorate is basically, we're seeing traction in building the political influence of the demand side. You see, the reason that Africa's democracy was in a parlor state and hijacked by the supply side, the politicians, was that, or is that, because we haven't quite gotten there yet, is that you have an electorate that acts as though
they're not bothered.
They're not interested. It's almost like, the mindset of the electorate is that somehow, someday, a Messiah would just come and things will be fine. So that they therefore have not exercised agency. They have failed to exert the kind of pressure that is necessary to determine the quality of democratic outcomes. So what we've had is electorate that has no power to influence political outcomes to their own benefit. That's what we've had. Now you're hearing them restless. Suddenly, Nigerians are saying, wait a minute, why are we all sitting like ducklings and a bunch of fellows are just running the country roughshod? Now people are connecting their lives to the failures of the supply side. That's very important. But then the second thing you said is that INEC, the law, the regulatory context is improving. The Amendment Act of INEC, which the citizens fought for, you saw that. The level of engagement of the citizens in pushing that INEC needed to be the law needed to be amended in order to improve election integrity. That also is evidence of it. But guess what we're still struggling with? We're still struggling with the supply side, because the supply side is so powerful. It has such dominance of the democratic space, and the supply side is one class.
And it's dictating a lot.
It's one class. It has nothing to do with what acronym their political party is called. They are basically entrenched, and they are people who, on a pattern, have always been able to subordinate the common good for their private and personal interests. So we've got a long journey still to make to get us to that place where we can say that our democratic journey has actually truly begun. But I would say that these early signs are very interesting for me. I am happy about it.
Let me take you away from your passion to your expertise. And that is policy and economic issues. If you were President Buhari, that is the president, that is the president, if you were in his shoes, based on the scenarios that have played out and the incidents and the events of the past days, what would you have done differently on the issue of the CBN policy and the Naira notes controversy?
President Buhari was long told that the Central Bank of Nigeria does not belong to the president. You don't take a monetary authority and put it in the villa. I said it publicly many years ago. I said the monetary policy is being compromised because it was evident that it was being run from the villa. I said it in this country. What I find very intriguing is how, people just don't follow the things that are spoken. There are many things I've said about what we're seeing today. Like I got insulted for them, but I couldn't care about who insulted me. I stand on the path of truth. And here I am, watching every one of those who insulted me for calling attention to the things that were wrong with our polity and the management of our economic policy coming to where I was many years ago. So I have no word for President Buhari because, frankly, I'm not one of those Nigerians with any expectation from President Buhari. All I just want to see President Buhari do is make sure that the elections happen and that we get a new government voted by Nigerian citizens who want a society that functions. I mean, when you think of all the indicators of fragility, we now tick the box at the highest end of it. And that's terrible. So you look at this whole...
Could you phrase that statement in a more straightforward, for our viewers to understand? You're describing the state of our polity. How would you better put it?
It's in a state of higher end fragility. Look, we were always either number 12, number 13. I think last time we were number 13 on the fragile state index.
Which means?
Which means that you're close enough to a failed state. So that level of fragility, you want to push it further? What are you doing? Are you joking? People think that the personal interests of these political rascals should take the country into a state of implosion?
Would you have approved a CBN policy of a Naira note swap at this period?
Well, you can tell clearly, as I said, that the monetary policy has become so completely immersed in the politics of our country, which is such a disgrace. It is so sad that what is purely technical, and we don't kid ourselves to say that there is no element of political context within which monetary policy, fiscal policy happen. I mean, more fiscal policy than monetary policy, but monetary policy still happens within a political context, but not to the extent of what we've seen under President Buhari. Frankly speaking, I don't even know whether there are economists left in the Central Bank of Nigeria, because when I look at the serial failure to think through policies, even what we call policy timelines, to think through the policies on the basis of the evidence that's on the table, so that data is helping to drive your decision more than impulse or anecdote or the whims and the caprices of those that you report to. Our central bank is compromised,
right.
and it has to be number one thing on the agenda.
It's difficult to pause you, actually, because I've touched a nerve within you. I've taken you to your expertise, but we need to take a break. And when we come back, I would like to know what you would suggest as a way out of this quagmire. It does look like there is a lot of confusion in the polity. Governors are not agreeing with the president. There is a Supreme Court stand on the matter. The people are on the receiving end. Where do we go from here? Elections are 5 days away. And by the way, I would like to also know, how do you think Nigerians should decide on Saturday? These are some of the conversation we'll be having with Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. It's going to be in a few minutes. Join us again, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Dr. Obiageli, Catherine Ezekwesili. I know that we get you right there. Founder of Fixed Politics. Thank you so much for joining us. There's so much former in your name. I will not go to the former any longer. I'll stay with the present. Thank you so much indeed. We were on the trajectory, getting your expert views on the present situation and beyond what has happened and the probability of, and the possibility of what could have happened. Let's go into the solution. We are in this space now.
Right.
The fact is, at the moment, people are angry that they do not have the cash in their hands to feed, to buy commodities and all of that. That has, in some way, some economic implications on the price of commodity, inflation issues, and all what have you. What would you do if you have the powers to take action in this kind of situation? Let's assume that the Nigerian people have consulted you to fix this problem. Give us your expert view on where we need to go or how we need to fix this problem.
So I would first identify the root cause of the crisis that we find ourselves in terms of the implementation of the money, of the currency, the redesign policy, because with diagnostics, you don't then do the wrong things. It tells you, what are you trying to solve for? You have to understand, what am I trying to solve for? Now, what the central bank was initially heading out to solve for was what everyone knows as cashless policy, right? But the cashless policy is not rocket science. It's been implemented in several other countries at different times and stages in the economy. And what is very clear is that it's something you have to prepare very well for, because there is a transition from an old system into a new system. And so those countries that have been very, very deliberate in the way they did their transitioning from, a dominantly cash-based society to a society where it is less cash. People think that cashless policy should mean no cash policy. No, it just simply means that, turn it around, it becomes less cash policy. You give people the incentive and the reason to not want to load themselves with so much cash, right? So, but you also have cash as an alternative part, but not to the extent that it used to be in your economy.
Would you roll the policy back, or would you extend it?
There is no reason to roll the policy back, even just by virtue of what technology is doing for us as a continent. It does make a lot of sense for us to not be loading bags of money all over the place. But when you think of how the operational plan for this policy has been bungled, it just is appalling. And to think that it also happened so close to your elections. It just is a double whammy, as the Americans would say, you know. So what you need to sort of do is figure out, what are we solving for? If we're purely solving for less cash in our society as the medium of exchange, then what we would do is plan properly for the transitioning. What you can see now is that the banks are not ready. Their technology is not upgraded to the point where they can actually respond effectively. So there's a complete system breakdown.
Now, let
me finish.
Sorry.
So that is the principal thing that you think you're solving for. There are very clear pathways to solving it. But guess what's going on? There's a second thing that we seem to be solving for, which has now taken ascendancy over the monetary policy. We are using the central bank to solve the problem of criminality in our politics. That's an objective.
Is it working?
Is it an objective that the central bank should be smack into? There's something wrong with that. Because what has happened is, you have, because of criminals that you know, the government knows the criminals. It knows them. They are part of them. It knows them. If it wanted to, in a transparent manner, get them, it would get them. But what it has done is, it has basically discomfited the citizens, the poor women in the market, the people just barely eking out a living, are now struggling because of the criminality of our politics. So, by mixing all of it up, you've created this chaos. What is clear is that the politicians have again put their interest above that of the citizens. We have 5 days to the election. The part of this that worries the Nigerian today that I followed is, they love the idea that politicians should not be able to have access to the kind of wealth, illicit wealth, that they use normally to buy up our democracy. It's democracy for sale, normally, for these people. So there's that part of the desire of citizens to see that that does not happen. However, in that desire, poor execution of monetary policy has taken the economy. Our productivity is going to get a big dent for this. So what to do in this situation? You have to take the least bad option. Is the least bad option that you're faced with now.
Which would be?
It would have to be that we say to citizens, hold on.
Be patient.
Just for the next 5 days. But everyone who created this theater of the absurd has to pay for it. They must pay. You know, we must build a society of consequences. The fact that people carry on things that destroy the common good and they get away with it should not continue in perpetuity. So, for the benefit of us getting through to this election, all that I'm looking for now is that nothing must make INEC sort of say, we're handicapped again, like what happened in 2011 elections. Some places were already voting when the elections were postponed. And then 2015, same story. 2019, same story. How is it that a country like Nigeria cannot conduct elections without stories? Even Guinea-Bissau can conduct elections. So If we're failing in that regard, it means that something fundamentally is wrong with the way that we operate all the many parts that have to be connected.
I have just a few minutes to go, and let me ask you 3 quick questions. You've fundamentally answered my questions about the CBN policy and the issues of the narrow redesign policy. Do you see a messiah on the ballot going into Saturday?
Why would you even use the word messiah in a democracy?
Well,
the democracies are not supposed to deliver messiahs.
For the want of a better word,
right.
The feeling of the average citizen today is one that they're looking for someone that will take their pains away.
So
it does not exist, yes, but maybe an adjective that is closest to it. Who do you see on this ballot that could give some succor or that could fix the problem of Nigeria, or the person that has a solution?
Well, I've said it and I'll repeat it again. It's Peter Obi. I mean, there's no way I can cast a vote for an Atiku or a Tinubu. They don't check the box.
Kwankwaso is there.
No. I wouldn't.
Jumadi is there.
So listen to me. I have made a decision that I have a framework of leadership. I call them the 3 C's: character, competence, and capacity. I've been talking about this for decades. So when I use it and I do a weighting of the scores of each of the candidates around these 3 attributes that make up my framework of leadership, character, competence, and capacity, the person who comes out with a score higher than that of the others, because you're not compromising character for competence, or compromising competence for character, or compromising
what about
capacity.
track records?
So
of
it's part of that all of that is contained in character, competence, and capacity. When you sort of uncouple all of these and you look at the things that are inside of it, then you find that there's no way I'm going to vote for anyone other than Peter Obi in this election. And I do believe that citizens who care for themselves, citizens who want a break with what we've seen in these decades and decades of failure, should at least vote for a candidate that they can relate to, a candidate that would listen to what it is that they care about. Because for the first time, the citizens of Nigeria are engaged. They're going to hold Mr. Peter Obi to account for governance, because he would be a product of citizens' desire to break away from the old.
We're totally out of time. I would have loved to get, even if it's a 20 seconds of your response on what you said about Mr. Atiku Abubakar when you were in the cabinet on the issue of the economic management team.
No, he wasn't head of the economic management team. And I mean, there's nothing to discuss on this one. He wasn't head of the economic management team. I don't know why that thought of, that passing off and that trying to take accolades for what he did not do had to be an issue. He constitutionally, vice president normally coordinates this matter of the relationship between the federal government and states. It's called the National Economic Council. It is that meeting that governors come to once a month in Abuja, just to make sure that they discuss the issues of what's going on in the economy. But the technical work of really designing economic reforms, no, not Mr. Atiku.
Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, it's good to have this conversation again with you.
Thank you so much.
And I wish you the very best as Nigerians go to the polls.
I've got to get my last line, which is to say to Nigerians, the greatest possession you have now is your PVC.
Absolutely.
You want to design a new Nigeria, use your PVC to design it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ezekwesili, for your time tonight. Just before we go, the decision day beckons everyone closer than ever. If you have your voter card, you don't have any excuse not to use it. There are millions of citizens who will not be able to vote, and they will be counting on you to act on their behalf. If there is one thing you will do right, it's to vote right. Your vote will shape the future of this country going forward. Vote who you believe will do right by you and by Nigerians and by this nation. If you blame others for their actions and inaction for getting us to where we are today, Whom would you blame for your own inaction, bad behavior of choosing to choose wrongly, or staying at home or not deciding to vote? Stand up and be counted. Nigeria needs you, and the time is here. And that's our show for tonight, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm Sean Kimale. God bless Nigeria.